Hey Brad, I hope all is fine. It's time for video number 8. 8. Yes, it couldn't be better than this game actually, because there was a lot of suspense in this game, even though it was such a short game. I think that the arising positions were very, very interesting. And okay, let's skip the opening really quick, because you know that in this full pawns attack, white is usually heading for the d5 advance, because otherwise if they don't go d5, you go bishop g4 and you attack the center with f6 before that. If you haven't seen this game by Korchnoi, it is in my great predecessors. He won a game like that, if I recall correctly, against Geller. And also, if you want to study this opening, definitely have a look at the games by Bagirov. Bagirov once wrote a very nice book about the Alekhine defense, and it's still probably the most interesting book that has been published on the team. Of course, there is Albert, who has very, very good book on this one, and Baburin. These are the three specialists of that line. Okay, d5 capture. He's in a hurry to create counterplay, and then he goes knight e4, bishop d7, e6, f6, d6, bishop c6. I guess pretty much all of this you have studied at home, and you have prepared yourself for this one. And now he took on c6. Now another way to play here is queen g4, to which you have to be careful if this ever happens in your game. Because here the move short castle that has been played in one game is actually quite dangerous, and I believe that white has very strong initiative after knight f5. So that's the source of the game Amunatov against Levin. In fact, that game ended rather quickly. He sacrificed the exchange, played queen f8, but the rook d5 was very strong. And probably he just missed this little tactics, as now queen f5 is obviously knight e7, and he resigned, being down a piece on move number 22. So again, if this happens ever, bishop h4 is the way for you to play instead of castling. So bishop h4, weaken the king, you have lead in the development, and you need to go for that one. On g3, then you take the rook bravely, because on queen g7 you always have bishop to f6. That's not a big thing. And if they say castle, you also should castle. Now here knight f5 is still an option, but after queen f6 and e7, the best way to get rid of all this trouble is just to take on f5, give the rook back, but get into an endgame. And in the endgame, I think that the only one who can be better is black. You're up a pawn, and okay, your pieces are good. That's slight theoretical deviation. Now knight c6, queen takes d1, rook takes d1, knight c2, and you need to take the bishop here, I believe. And we come to question number 1. How does theory assess the position after bc6, and what should the plans for both sides be? That's a really very interesting question, because at a glance it should be white who has the better position. He has seemingly more active pieces, the king is on e3, he has a passed pawn on e6, the black's pawn structure is damaged, it's ruined completely. However, there is always one but, and in this case the but is the fact that the king on e3 is quite vulnerable, one thing. And the other thing is that the pawn on e6 is more or less doomed in this situation, and you can always take it. So to cut this long story short, from, I think there was a total of 8 or somewhere between 8 and 10 games in the mega base, white, I think he had only one win overall, and 5-6 losses. So overall, very, very bad line for white, even though objectively it should be approximately equal, but I think it's easier to play with the black pieces rather than with white. g3, the move that he played, and you were asking if short castle and rook f6 is the best plan for you. I think that until one moment you played very well. Just to show a couple of other examples, bishop a6 develops the bishop, connects the rooks, etc. Can be answered rook b8, okay, paying attention to the threat, and also preparing some threats along the b file. And after b3, short castle, rook f1 and rook e8. That's a key move, and it's worth remembering in situations like that. King d3 and bishop b4, another key move that we will see a little bit later. I think that black was already a little bit better. He's winning the pawn on e6. He won the pawn on e6, and he went on to win this game. Ovechkin against Ivanov. Ovechkin is a grandmaster, and Ivanov is 23-20 player. So that's already one very, very good win for the second player. And indeed, once that you take the pawn on e6, you're also having this d5 square for your pieces. The double pawns, even though they are doubled, they are not so bad because they are giving you an excellent outpost for the knight. If something goes wrong, you can always go knight e5, trade the knights, and get into opposite colored bishop endgame as well. Now bishop e2 looks like the most natural move rather than bishop to a6. Bishop e2, and this has been played in the game Eva Videnova with the white pieces, Bulgarian player. I gave her some classes before she became Bulgarian champion already, I think 2 or 3 times. And with the black pieces we have Victoria Chmilite, the former wife of Alexei Shirov, and a very, very strong player. She's a male grandmaster. So after short castle, Chmilite, who is famous for her attacking style, she played like that, gave a check, lured the king on e4, and only after that bishop f6. On bishop g4, rook a b8, already concretely threatening knight c4. King d3. Now we see why the king was lured on e4. c4 square should be somehow defended. Rook d8 check, king c2 takes, and please note that taking on d1 with the rook, which is the natural recapture, can be answered knight c4. That reveals all the tactical possibilities that black has. Knight e3 is a threat, rook b2 is a threat. He cannot stop, she cannot stop all these things. So white took in the game with the knight, and once again the destiny of that pawn on e6 was sealed after rook b4, rook c4. This is also a moment to be mentioned. Black doesn't want to trade the rooks and to get into a drawish position. Even though if she wanted to play it safe, she could have already brought the king to e7 and put the rook on b6 after rook b3, which will most likely lead to a draw. But she kept the rooks alive, and then she went for that pawn, and she went on to win later that game as well. So the king came on e7, and slowly that pawn was surrounded. The active pieces won the game at the end of the day. So that's about that game. Now we are moving to your game, g3. And once again, why is black so successful if they're having such a bad pawn structure? I think that I have told you already my theory about the 3 steps that we need to follow in every single situation whenever we are playing endgame. First of all, we are looking at the activity of the pieces. Second of all, activity of kings, and only after that comes the pawn structure. So in this particular case, I think the activity of the black pieces, which are actually attacking this king, thus cutting the second part of this activity of kings into small pieces, tearing it apart, is the most important thing. And this was the thing that you needed to use in the game to attack this king. And this was the way for you to prove that you have the slightly better game, I would say, already. Because g3 is not very accurate. So g3 castled, that's nice. And he came up with a novelty bishop g2. The only predecessor, so here b3, to which black reacted with bishop c5 check. Not a bad move, but maybe bishop b4 was even better. And then after knight e4, knight e5 check, king d4, rook to e8. Black's play is very natural, and you're already just taking that pawn, I believe, anytime that you like, with the advantage for black. Or also first rook to d8 and then rook to e8. It's up to you how exactly are you going to do the things. Well, that predecessor, so bishop c5 check, king d3, rook d8 check, rook f2 check, activity, he took on d1 and he won very quickly. Obviously, white, I don't know what exactly happened, maybe this is incomplete game. But in any case, I think it's quite obvious who is better in that situation. After knight takes d1, rook d2, followed by knight d5, bishop d4 in case of a need, this king comes to e7. I think that black is completely dominating. Well, bishop g2 shouldn't challenge you, and I believe that you did well. Rook f6, bishop h3, so he lost the tempo, now you're bringing the other rook out. And here comes probably the most controversial moment of the game. Like I told you, activity of pieces is the most important thing. And you're bringing the last piece into motion, into the game, rook a to f8, which is definitely a good move. But I think there was a better one. In between check on c5, to bring this piece into the game as well, to force the king to stand on e4, because on king d3, you can use this after that for the attack. Also, you're getting the second rank with rook f2. And say knight e4, a forced line runs like that, knight e5 check. Actually, we'll come back to this in a moment. I think this is the best defense. Just to mention the other alternatives, king e2 obviously bad because check, this pawn is dropping immediately, and then after e6 will drop as well. And then king e4, again, rook f2. So for you, the most important thing is to bring the rook on the second rank, obviously. And this one we can keep on the 8th one for the time being. After say b3, we can do bishop b4. That's a move that I told you we are going to see more and more. The idea being to occupy the d5 square. And after rook c1, you have two interesting moves, either rook e8 immediately, or first rook d8, and after rook d1, then rook to e8 to leave this pawn also exposed. In either case, your advantage is very, very serious. And finally, I think the best move for him would be to go king d3, and this is an incredible resource that he has to actually defend his position. After rook f2, knight e4, this line is pretty forced. Rook takes d5, the point. Rook f3 in between check, very unpleasant. So we are taking this guy on e4, and a study-like draw after bishop e6 and rook d1 threatening rook d8. We have to stop it, and he wants to come from the other side, and we just have to repeat. It's a very nice line and a very nice salvation by white, but he has to find it over the board. I don't really think that it's so easy, and I actually doubt that any human being can find it over the board. If he has to find a line like that to prove equality, I think this speaks quite well who is the person who has the advantage and how big that advantage is. So bishop c5 was the first important moment in the game. Now rook f8, that was played again. I don't really think that this is bad. It should be okay, and you should still have the advantage. And we come to question number 3. Black's 23rd move, bishop f6, is a critical moment indeed. And you're asking if there was a better way to exploit white's knight, and yes, there is a better way. You can attack it from the b4 square. The difference, well, first of all, he cannot play the move that he played in the game, rook f1, because after rook takes f1, e7, there is simply rook f6, for example, and then you up a pawn. So you can use that square. And if he, for example, defends with the move rook c1, after bishop b4, if he goes rook c1, you can play knight c8. And that's an important resource which I suspect you didn't see during the game. But one of your problems that I didn't mention so far was the situation of the knight on b6, as it is limited by the white pawns. So it seems like it's going to stay there forever. One idea to bring it into life is to go on d5, especially if you can chase away this knight. But if it stays there, it's very difficult to bring it into the game. Difficult, but not necessarily impossible. And knight c8 was the way to do it. And after that, these 4 pieces will badly attack the opponent's king. So the game would be pretty similar to middle game, not to an endgame, which means that the activity of the pieces is even more important factor than the activity of the kings. So bishop b4 was your way. Bishop b4 and this knight c8 idea. After bishop f6, rook f1, he found an amazingly strong move. Actually, sorry, bishop b4. Did I miss something here? No, I don't think so. Yes, okay, so he found an amazingly strong move after bishop f6, rook to f1. And you thought that he blundered, that after rook takes h2 there are two pieces hanging. You saw up to rook f2 and you thought his only try was bishop f5, after which g6 wins for black, but you missed the quite king e3. Okay, now how to avoid this, we are going to talk about it in a moment. First, obviously, you saw that bishop c3 is losing to this and the pawn is getting promoted, which should have already brought you to a situation of alert. If this pawn is winning that easily, then there might be something, and you have to pay attention to that pawn. That's a clear sign that there is something going on there. Okay, so you took, but I think bishop e7 was still a move that you could have played, and it was objectively probably the best move, to which he can either go rook h1, and then you can find the idea that we were talking about with bishop b4, or the other thing that he needs to do is to take on f2, but then you take and you are winning a pawn after that, the pawn on h2. As on rook h1, well, you can go then bishop f6, and this idea is in the air, and this pawn will be hanging, so you're definitely the one who is the favorite, and most likely this will happen because people do not find easily even moves like rook h1, admitting that rook f1 wasn't that great. So rook f1, you took on h2, and then he played e7, and this is another very strong move. And you were asking if rook h3 is the only try. I think it's the only try. Now, are you going to hold this one? I cannot say for sure, honestly. As the rising position, he can easily trade your rook. I think this is good for him. And then he can centralize the king. So I suspect that this should be a loss. But you can give him a very good fight. After a5, say rook a4, you have bishop c3, one idea, or you can even go h5 and try to get rid of the pawns on the queen side, thus leaving him only those on the king, on the queen side. Again, objectively, that should be a loss. Rook is very strong in situations like that, but there are plenty of fortresses that you can try to play for. And this is your only chance, really, because what happened in the game, bishop e7, check, and rook d8, rook f2. Now we said that you missed the move king to e3 and you saw bishop f5. That's correct. Seeing a move like bishop f5 is the first thing that you should do in a situation like that. But bishop f5 is not winning for the simple reason that you even have the move king g8. So that's not the most dangerous move, obviously. You have two defenses, not one. And but at the same time, your pieces are quite loose. And white's pieces are dominating the board at the moment, which means that you need to spend a little bit more time and to see if they can further dominate your position. It's not only about forcing lines at the moment. It's also about the quality of the pieces, and white's pieces are definitely of a better quality than yours. And having said that, also I would say that the move king e3 is a forcing move, so definitely need to check it. King e3, and then your rook is having only two squares. Rook f6, knight e4 is easy to see after king e3, and if this one is losing, then it's easy also to calculate that rook f1 would be taken that square, and it's transposing into knight e4, which is again a study like win this time. So I guess that you didn't feel so bad after losing this game. After all, it's bad to lose for a blunder, but it's not so bad when you lose in a beautiful way. So how to avoid blunders like that? Don't forget to check all the resources by the opponent, the forcing moves. King e3 is a forcing move. That's an attack of your defender, the two defenders. Okay, there's nothing you can do for the one on f8 at the moment but to keep the rook around. So look carefully. Don't end the line until you see all the forcing moves, captures and threats. this is the only thing that I can give you at the moment as an advice. And it looks like a very shallow advice, but the reality is that this is how it works. Okay, that's pretty much everything for today. I think that your position was a very, very fine one, and the reason for that was the king on e4, which was standing on the road of your pieces, and the optimal setup for you was to double the rooks, but also to put the bishop in some lines on c5, in other lines on b4, and to try to bring this knight into the attack, all the 4 pieces, after which you would be clearly better, very close to winning, so you can bravely go and play this line into the future as well. And remember the 3 steps to use in almost every single endgame position: activity of pieces, activity of kings, and finally the pawn structure only. Thank you for your attention. See you next time.